Hi, welcome to the Here with Conference program, where we'll learn to deeply connect with our loved ones through mindful listening. I'm Dr. Khatri with Family Hearing Services here in Virginia. And as we start the program, I would like for you to know that there is a worksheet PDF in the description below that you can access, because a lot of there's parts of the program where you're going to be taking down notes or writing down reflections. So that would be, if you have access to the printer, you can print out the worksheet ahead of time. So that way you can fill in as we go along with the program, or just put it in the comment section or message me if you have any questions, reflections. I'll be happy to respond. And think of this as a safe space for you to kind of dive in deeper and learn how to mindfully connect with your loved ones. So as we start the program, I would like for you to really think about your hearing journey. Whether you've recently been diagnosed with hearing loss or you've had a history of hearing loss for many years, you've been dealing with it, and you've been, still looking for something. And here we are with this program. And I would like for you to take a moment to sit down and write your intentions for your hearing journey. We'll give about 30 seconds to a minute for you to reflect on this, and I'll be back and we'll keep going. All right, so the next thing that I would like for us to do is, when you think about hearing with confidence, I would like for you to write down what are your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings, and what actions are you planning to take towards achieving hearing with confidence. Okay. And the reason that I want us to do this exercise is because we often attract or manifest what we think, believe, and how we feel. So when all of these are aligned, then achieving our goals become a lot easier. Okay. So again, let's take about a minute. And I would just like for you to, whatever your first thought is about when you think about hearing with confidence, what comes to mind, and then write down what your beliefs are about your capability about hearing with confidence in any given situation, whether it's a one-to-one conversation with your loved one at the dinner table, or it's in a large group situation where you're with friends and family members. I would like for you to write what your beliefs are, given the hearing loss you have. What would you believe that you're able to do? And then let's move into writing your feelings. Do you feel excitement now that you got your hearing aids? Are you excited to start the journey and experience hearing with confidence? And are you hopeful? Or do you feel fear, given the significant amount of hearing loss you have, if you're going to be able to, do you have any doubts if you're able to manage hearing confidently in the situations that matter? And what actions have you taken or are you taking to be able to hear with confidence? So I'll give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll be back and we'll get started with the program. All right. So as we move on, here's some of the things that we're going to discuss on. We're going to touch on the neuroscience behind mindful listening. So we have some evidence on why we're learning mindful listening and how it's going to help with our journey. And we're going to learn about the 4 levels of hearing. We're going to learn about listening fatigue and how to recognize the moments we check out and what's the importance of recognizing such moments. And we're going to learn more about empathy and how there are some unintentional muted blocks from the loved ones that could disrupt the flow of communication. And we're going to learn some concepts that are called defeat scripts or statements. And we're going to go through celebrating success with gratitude and the link process and how do we boost connection that we built. And throughout all of this, we'll touch on self-advocacy. Okay, so we'll start with, why mindful listening? How is it different from just hearing? So with hearing, it's passive and physiological, versus listening, you have to actively pay attention. And hearing is just there's sound waves that you're detecting. You don't have to be actively involved. Versus with listening, you're making sense of what is being said, and there's some gaps that are getting filled, and you also have an emotional connection with the speaker. Okay, so basically, think about driving in a car. Just hearing all the honks in the background, it's more the hearing part. You don't have to actively look out for those honkings. You just hear, and that's just automatically happening. Versus listening would be you're actually paying attention, trying to listen to a conversation. Maybe your grandchild is trying to talk to you and she's mumbling, or your wife is across the table and you're trying to hear her. So those types of situations, you're actively involved and you're listening, and you're not just catching what is the meaning behind the words, but you're also connecting with the speaker at an emotional level. So what happens when you have a hearing loss? There's incomplete audio cues. And because of that, the brain works over time to fill in those gaps. And that is, it's a lot of cognitive load for your brain to handle. And that causes listening fatigue. When listening fatigue happens, amygdala gets activated. Amygdala is the emotional center at the brain. It basically is a part of the brain that basically is telling the brain to either be ready for fight or flight, right? So when the listening fatigue kicks in, the amygdala gets activated, and a lot of patients with hearing loss, they would just withdraw from conversations because you're feeling a lot of frustration, okay? So what happens is when we listen mindfully, we're rewiring our brain. And we're leveraging neuroplasticity. And when we make it a daily practice of listening mindfully, then these pathways get strengthened. Okay, so basically when you look at the brain here, you have your auditory cortex that picks up the raw data, and then the prefrontal cortex is recognizing the meaning. It's organizing the memory, filtering out the noise in the background, and making sense of what is being said. And the limbic system, that's where your amygdala is, that's the emotional core. And that's deciding if the sound is safe, if it's a threat, or if it's a frustration. Okay. And then depending on, your experience, then the amygdala gets kicked in. So when we're listening mindfully, then there's multiple parts of the brain activating at the same time. So you're able to hear, understand better, but you're also able to connect better. And when you do this on a daily basis, then these neural pathways get strengthened. Okay. So with hearing, there are actually 4 levels of hearing. The basic level is your external hearing or your physical foundation, where you're just detecting that there's some sound. Okay. When you move into your second level, that's intellectual. And at this point, you're not just detecting that there is a sound, but your brain is now kicking in and making sense of what that sound means. You're understanding the words. Okay. And the third level of hearing is your emotional hearing. So in this level, you're not just hearing the words, but you're also feeling the emotion behind the words, and you're connecting with the person speaking to you. And the fourth level is your transformative hearing. And this is being fully present and connected through sound. And this is the ultimate state of peace and relationship. And this is where you feel like you're deeply connected with the person you're talking to, whether it's a friend, a loved one, a coworker, boss, or your staff, whoever you're trying to talk to, you feel like you're deeply connected to that person. And that's what we're trying to achieve with the program we're doing today. So I would like for us to take a minute here and to reflect on your journey and to kind of think about which level are you often. Do you feel like you're spending a lot of time and energy just fiddling with hearing aids, just trying to be able to hear sounds? Does it feel like it's just mechanical? Or do you feel like you're just processing information? You're just like overwhelmed trying to understand what people are saying, and you're exhausted trying to fill in the gaps? That's your level 2. Or do you feel like, there are times that you don't hear so much that you start like bluffing your way through conversations? You're just smiling and you're just nodding to just keep peace, but you're just kind of, at that level where you're struggling to emotionally connect with the speaker. Okay, so take a minute, write down what level are you often at. And that way we have some awareness on, where we're at as we start this process. Check out warning signs. So what happens a lot of times is when you have a significant hearing loss, you're in a social gathering, at some point you just check out of conversation. And that's just listening fatigue kicks in, and you're checking out of conversations. And it can happen at, you can experience different levels of listening fatigue. It may just be, mentally fatigued, where you're realizing that you're just smiling, nodding throughout the conversation, not necessarily following because you're just so fatigued. Then you would have some emotional effects where you're frustrated, you're irritable, and you have the urge to leave because you're just so overwhelmed with all of that information and how hard your brain is working to hear and understand the conversation. And some of the physical symptoms that you would notice is headaches, tension in the shoulders, just feeling foggy. So the reason we're bringing attention to your listening fatigue and the moments you check out of conversation is so we're able to bring awareness, and you're able to say, okay, so, is it time for us to protect our energy so you don't kind of continue being in that situation and experience complete burnout? And it's also when you bring awareness, then you also are able to advocate for yourself and say, okay, this is very noisy, and you need to be able to, tell whoever you're talking to that, hey, we need to move to a different spot or continue this conversation at a different time. And it also helps in preserving relationship, because then you're explaining to your loved one that you're not just ignoring them, that you've reached your cognitive limit because of how hard your brain is working to fill in the gaps and understand that conversation. Okay. So let's take another minute, and I would like for you to describe a recent time that you checked out. You just stopped trying to listen because it was getting too hard. And as you reflect on that, I would like for you to think about what was the trigger. Was it a noisy environment? Were you just tired? It was later in the day, or you just had a fast talker or somebody who mumbles, or it was just a lengthy conversation and you were just trying hard to piece in all the gaps. So, when we touched the different levels of hearing, we talked about emotional hearing, and that's where empathy comes in. Okay. So without empathy, you're getting the words, but you're not necessarily connecting. With empathy, you begin to not just hear the words, you also begin to hear feelings. Okay. So it's about how they feel when they're saying what they're saying. Okay. So there are three different types of empathy. One is your cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and compassionate empathy. So with cognitive empathy, you're just reflecting back the words without any judgment. So if the speaker says something, so you're just saying repeating it back without any emotion. Okay. Or you're responding without any emotion. And then emotional empathy is when you're listening to the emotions that are along with the words, and you're naming or acknowledging that feeling as you're responding back to the person. Okay. Versus with compassionate empathy, you're offering presence and support without taking over. So a lot of times what happens is, as we hear conversations, our monkey mind kicks in and it starts relating what we're hearing to an experience we've had, and we get lost in our thoughts, and we're not often in the room present in the conversation. And so with compassionate empathy, you're not just listening to the words and the emotions, you're also offering your presence and your support without taking over the conversation. Okay. So sometimes when we want to connect, we end up putting some barriers without realizing it. The intentions are often good. We're either trying to fix something, cheer the person up, or we're trying to relate to whatever they said. But instead of, listening and acknowledging what they're saying and responding, we often end up saying something that acts as a barrier without us even realizing it. Okay. And we call these the muted blocks. So each letter of the acronym represents a different block. The M starts for minimizing. And so if there's a scenario where somebody is expressing how exhausted they are after a loud family wedding, instead of, acknowledging the exhaustion, the person may just say, hey, at least you have these tiny new invisible hearing aids, and nobody saw at the wedding that you were actually wearing them, and imagine how clunky they were 10 years ago. So what's happening is you're skipping over the current situation and you're trying to find a positive in it, and you're making the patient is made to feel that whatever they feel like is, they're not allowed to feel tired. The second block is upping. So this is like a comparison thing. So if somebody says, hey, I'm too exhausted after listening at the dinner table, then the block may be saying, hey, I know exactly how you feel. It was so loud in there, I don't think anybody heard it. And I gave up too. So it's like, your monkey brain kicked in, you're trying to compare their experience with your experience, and and related. And again, this equates a temporary environmental nuisance for the person with normal hearing, but the cognitive load that the person with hearing loss is experiencing, that may be completely different. So if you're a spouse that doesn't have as much hearing loss as the person that as your loved one does, then when you say things like that, then it just feels like you're not considering the cognitive load that they're carrying because of the hearing loss that they have. The next block is teaching. And, a lot of times when somebody says, hey, I'm frustrated, I didn't hear all of the conversation, I missed a joke. And then the teaching would be something like your partner or your friend or loved one telling you, remember, you were supposed to sit in this direction, so there's not much noise. You should have paid more attention on what your audiologist told you. So what happens is it's you're trying to help the person. You're trying to remind them about what they were supposed to do in that situation. But again, it kind of doesn't acknowledge their frustration that they missed something important during that conversation. E is erasing. And in this scenario, so if a patient is asking to move to a quieter area because the background music is too loud or distracting, the block may be, oh, come on, they're barely playing it. It's not that loud. You're just overreacting. And in this case, it's just completely denying the patient's physical reality, and it's telling them that the ears are lying to them. Okay. And the last block is distancing. So if a patient is slowly explaining a difficult concept and needs the listener to maintain eye contact for speech reading, and the listener may start checking out. They may be looking at the phone, they may be looking around the room, they may be sighing, things like that. And this is signaling that the effort required for communication with the patient is boring, it's not worth it. And this is the ultimate empathy silence, right? And so these blocks we all experience, in our everyday situations. So what I would like for you to do is, again, take a moment to reflect. Which of these blocks do you feel like you encountered most often? And how does it make you feel when you encounter these blocks? And do you ever use these blocks on yourself or on the loved ones? I've heard, stories where patient comes in and they're like, they come with their adult child, and they may say that my son or daughter, they're just so frustrated. I'm trying to tell them so and so, and then all they say is, didn't you just get new hearing aids? Shouldn't you hear better? Or they would say, why can't you hear better? Things like that. And I've also had it the other way where patient's relatives come and say that the patient may just give up on a conversation and say, okay, and they may just say, never mind, and try to wrap up the situation. So think about it and take a few minutes, and I'll have some music again in the background for a minute. I want you to think about what you encounter. How do you feel when you encounter these blocks? And do you ever use these blocks on yourself or your loved ones? And again, think of this as a safe space. Whether you're taking it down on a piece of paper or you're, writing it in the comments or messaging me directly, I'm here to hold space for you, for anything that arises as you go through and reflect on what blocks you're encountering. We'll give it a minute and then we'll start back again, okay? move on to the next part. Now, think of communication as a bridge between two people. So we all have a deep human need to be heard and understood. And when we have normal hearing, often the communication is easy and we walk across the bridge easy to be able to connect to the person we love. But with hearing loss, the bridge becomes harder to cross because there's listening fatigue, and you stop being a builder trying to cross the bridge and you start using defeat scripts. Okay, so what are these defeat scripts? Again, with the acronym, the D stands for dismiss, E stands for exclude, F is fault, E is echoing shame, A is attack, and T is terminate. And this could be something that, the person you're talking to says to you, or you say it to yourself. So some of the, let's go through each one of them. So with dismiss, with D for dismiss, the internal script that you may be saying to yourself is that it's not worth the effort to ask for a repetition again. Versus the external may be, never mind, it wasn't that something important. E is exclude, where either you feel like you need to exclude yourself from a certain conversation, or somebody excludes you from a group conversation because it's too much and they feel like you're going to miss it anyways. With F is fault, and you may internally have dialogue that is finding fault in yourself, that you're broken, you're wrong, I've had patients come in and say, I feel like I'm so dumb because I'm not able to even participate in a bridge game at my retirement community. And I've been such a successful person, and I've had patients that are like coaches, and they've all their lives they've taught others on how to coach and be a public speaker and all of that, and then with the hearing loss they've come back and said, gosh, I feel like I'm such a fool, I can't even handle simple conversations across the table. And you may also hear some external dialogues where your loved one may say, are you even paying attention? Do you have your hearing aids on? I think you have selective hearing. Now that you have your hearing aids, you should be hearing me perfectly. So these are things that we, hear in our heads, or these are scripts that we would hear from a loved one externally. And the next one is echo shame. Again, it's things like, I'm a burden to my family, I'm annoying them. Or externally, your loved one may say, I feel so tired repeating myself every single day. A is attack. You may internally snap and say, I'm so dumb, I couldn't participate in a simple conversation. You're attacking yourself for the inability to participate. Or externally, somebody may say, I already told you, stop yelling and start listening. And T is terminate, where you just take out your hearing aids. You're like, I'm just tired. I don't want to hear anything else for the rest of the day. Or externally, somebody may just say, okay, they repeated, and now they just walk away from the room, ending the conversation. Okay. Again, all of these scripts, they are barriers to connection. And it's very important. This is an important part for us to recognize. Only when we recognize what's stopping us, then we can think about how we can move past what is stopping us to be able to hear and connect more fully with our loved ones. So 3 reasons why we track and defeat statements or defeat scripts. One is to observe and pause. So we're able to catch ourselves before we create that block or, a statement internally. And then when you know what's helping and what's not helping, then you're able to attract environments and partners that are more supportive to you. Okay. And then the major reason to be aware of these scripts is to prevent relationship breakdown. Because one of the big side effects of somebody with hearing loss is emotional isolation. Over time, patients with hearing loss, we've seen tend to stop participating, and they emotionally try to isolate from conversations. Okay. So again, we're going to take a minute. We're going to reflect on these scripts so we're able to break through. Okay. So which part of the defeat script do you encounter or use most often? And what is the emotional cost to your relationship if you continue to follow these scripts? We'll give you a minute to think and reflect and, write down the answers, and we'll continue again back in a minute. You're ready to, and if you need a little bit longer, you're welcome to just pause the video and then start whenever you're done writing down your reflection. So moving forward, we've talked about blocks and then the muted blocks, the defeat scripts, and we've talked a lot about what's holding us back and what's creating blocks in communicating with our loved ones. But we also want to celebrate victories, right? Every small victory encourages us to move us forward. It helps to strengthen the relationship. It helps to rewire the brain towards positivity and builds motivation and momentum, and it brings balance. And it reduces stress and frustration. So I would like for you to, again, take a few minutes, and we're going to describe a specific moment where we felt like you're fully present in a conversation. And we're going to reflect on what helped you achieve this victory. Was it because you just got new hearing aids or got them programmed or cleaned and now you're able to hear better? Or did the conversation just happen in a quiet corner? Do you have a supportive partner that gave you the space and time to be able to express what you needed to say? Or was it just taking deep breaths and kind of, going through with the conversation? And how did it feel to be able to connect in that moment? Did you feel proud, included, connected, relieved? So again, take a minute, write down what comes up, and we'll get started in a minute. need a little bit longer break to reflect and write down your reflections, you're welcome to pause, but we'll continue on. So, what's a good way to reinforce these behaviors that lead to victory? How do we boost these behaviors? So, the way to do it is with these I see you statements. Okay, so the way you do it is you say I see, and you fill it in with an action, and then say this shows me that you are, and fill it in with a quality. So for example, when you reinforce yourself, you say, I see I'm wearing my hearing aids consistently, and this shows me I'm committed to better hearing. And to your loved one, the way you would reinforce them would be, hey, I see that you're rephrasing and going slowly with your conversation, and this shows me that you care about connecting with me. So it's very important that we practice this, because we're so often filled with all these negative thoughts and negative scripts that we tell ourselves. And this is the way that we're able to flip it and bring in some positivity. We're able to boost the behaviors that lead to victory. It's very important that, if you're seeing this, I would really encourage for you to do this at least once a day, one for yourself and one for your loved one. And bring, you're purposefully bringing your attention to something positive, and you're reinforcing yourself and your loved one for the behavior. Okay? All right, so we've talked about the emotional hearing. And so how do we connect it all and truly experience transformational hearing? And this is where the link process comes in, okay? Because hearing loss isn't just about sound. It's about connecting or linking two people together. So the way the process works is when you're having a conversation, you start with listening. So you're fully listening to whatever the speaker is saying. And the second step is you're identifying the emotion of the person talking to you. And the third step would be you're noticing the physical action that led to that emotion. And 4, you keep responding in a way that keeps the link alive. Okay, so when you practice using the link process as you're responding to communication, then this strengthens. This helps you to, instead of staying in your head and letting your monkey brain take over conversations, you're actually listening, getting emotional information, and you're noticing and you're reflecting it back. So you're acknowledging everything you heard. And that helps to keep that link alive, or the connection alive between the two people. Okay? So I would like for us to practice this with a partner, family member, friend for a week. And I would like for you to come back and reflect on, who are you with, where were you, and when you listened and stopped and focused on them, what were they saying, what were the emotion that you identified, and notice the barriers or any barriers that you noticed that caused the emotion, and then how did you take the action and respond in a way to keep that connection alive. Okay, just like I said with the other exercises, we need to be able to practice the reinforcing statements just the same way. This is the method of really, truly mindfully listening and connecting with our loved ones. So once you do the exercise, I would like for you to come back and reflect on how did it make you feel when you took the step to keep going and reflect and respond rather than just checking out of that conversation. And when you truly went through the process in that moment, what did you feel like to be truly heard and connected? And how did your partner respond when you reflected and responded during the conversation instead of checking out? We'll give in again, you can come back, pause, and do this part. Again, like I said, there's a worksheet in the description below that you can use to fill in. And I'm happy to, if you want to send it to me, I'm happy to take a look at it. I'll be honored to hold space for, whatever came up for you and your willingness to share to me. I would be honored to, look through some of that for you. But this kind of concludes our presentation for today, as we went through the different steps and kind of led into how we truly mindfully listen and connect with the loved ones. Any questions? Again, feel free to message me directly or put it in the comment section, and I'll be happy to respond back and maybe connect with you in private to, whatever comes up for us to discuss. And I really thank you for taking the time to learn this with me. It's been my lifelong, I guess, mission since I've been an audiologist to be able to truly connect my patients with their loved ones with better hearing. May the saints of connection from the 𝗵𝗲𝗿𝗁 philosophy, Gora and Nitai, empower your connections. Thank you so much for listening.